Welcome. So we've been doing this class, I think, almost 2 years, I think now. So each night we go into a little bit deeper into the quantum navigation material. And so last month, in July, we went over Diamond in the Heart. And we were going over specifically the black diamond. So tonight we're going to go into a little bit more of Diamond in the Heart. But where we left off yesterday, timeline jump.
The video from his last class is actually on YouTube. So if there's something, you can watch the one from last time, and I can give you that information after.
Anyway, where we left off, I broached the subject in the last Storm Wisdom evening, which was the diamond in the heart. Okay, but I didn't get into as much depth as we could have. I think because of the restriction of time, I could only skip a rock over the water and hit certain subjects of it. But where we're going to go tonight, I need to discuss or lay out some groundwork. And that groundwork requires a little understanding about the shape of a diamond. Because when we say diamond, everybody has in their mind pretty much a specific shape. And that specific shape, I'll try to draw real quickly here.
Without squeaking.
Okay, good point. Pretty much something close to this. Pardon my drawing. So this is pretty much a jeweler's version of a diamond that you get in your ring, okay? But we're talking about consciousness, diamond consciousness, okay? So a jeweler can take a stone and fashion it into just about any shape, but one of the most characteristic qualities of a diamond is its facets and its clarity, okay? So clarity and its composite, its component, is what we want to look at. To best understand a diamond in relationship to consciousness, it's good to have a comparative. And so one of the stones that we're all familiar with is a quartz crystal. Okay, so there's differences between a quartz crystal and a diamond. Usually you don't see a quartz crystal fashioned in the diamond sense. And a quartz crystal has a different atomic structure. And that atomic structure for a quartz crystal is silicon. So silicon has unique characteristics and properties, pluses and minuses, okay? And with quartz crystal, it's fashioned, usually you'll get a quartz crystal in a volcanic process, so under lots of heat. And that specific type of volcanism is andesitic. It's a process of magma that has a very sticky constitution to it. So it's very dense. And in that very dense, you get the, granite? Such compounds as granite. Well, in granite, as you know, there's quartz crystal in the amalgam. All right, so quartz crystal, it's a crystalline structure, so the atoms align in such a way that it's a repeating pattern. And it's very geometric. And that crystalline form can result in the quartz crystal being very, very clear. So when it's clear, and this is where our interest is it has unique properties with light in that it takes the visible spectrum of light and it allows it to pass through. Now I said visible spectrum. Okay? So quartz does not allow the silica, it's silicon-based, this does not allow for infrared and ultraviolet. But what it does do with the visible light spectrum is it has a tendency of where there's a loss of some of the color band, it'll borrow from the available color bands and balance it out. So crystals are really good for harmonizing frequency. Okay? Now, understanding that process, diamond is a little different. Diamond is created from a carbon base, a carbon that has been subjected to intense amounts of pressure and heat, and repeatedly. And when it's put under intense amounts of heat and pressure, over time what's happening to it is the atoms inside are aligning in optimal configurations towards each other. They align so perfectly, so optimally towards each other, that there's ultimate transparency. There's no distortion in a very clear diamond that's been through enormous amounts of pressure, heat, and repeatedly. So your clearest diamonds then, they have no distortion. And the unique thing in comparison to quartz, silicon, is that diamonds allow for infrared, all the visible spectrum, and ultraviolet. So there's no polarization. Diamonds, then, are a great metaphor for non-polarity, non-duality. They allow the full spectrum in, whereas silicon is a bit polarized. Okay, so what I'd like to go over is remember this aspect, okay? The quartz and the diamond in relationship to consciousness. Quartz really helps you balance your frequencies on all your chakras, and then that helps you work with your stories. And as we've seen, our stories work towards our belief systems work towards our inner tyrant, and as we start to unravel the stories, the belief systems, and the inner tyrant, then we take the monkey off our back, we get out of the mental merry-go-round, emotional roller coaster, hamster wheel of obligation, and then we can look at the original issues, our core fears, core challenges, without polarization. All right, so hold on to that. In the past few classes, we've looked at the Mobius, and the Mobius, as we remember, is important because as it flows, as there is no obstruction or resistance, then the charge can flow easily from positive to negative. And so in relationship, we saw that as we place the Mobius over us, we have the same energy, the mind and the emotions. And we saw over time how, as we've come into this world very open, we're very fluid, we're very joyous, adventurous, and we're very connected. But as we grow through experience, we move into challenges, and as we experience emotional challenges, emotional traumas, the emotional body starts a process of shrinking. The child starts to feel disconnected and starts to become a little more rigid. At the same time, in the emotional body, it starts to become a little bit rigid. At the same time, it's looking for a place that's not so threatening. So the environment that we were growing up in, if it's been very challenging, then the constriction continues and we seek out moving into an area where we don't face so much challenge, which is inside of the mental body. Inside of the logic and reason, we can feel a lot more safe. And so we start pursuing life from a more mental framework, to the point where we begin thinking about feelings, but not really accessing feelings. And so, as this process has gone on, the emotional body starts shrinking, and we have all kinds of traumas and issues layered in here. And so I've shown in the other classes about how as we are now seeking that to reconnect with those childlike qualities and characteristics, to get back into our emotional bodies, get back into the zest, the joy, and all of this, it requires us moving into the emotional body and actually feeling our feelings, re-experiencing our feelings. And as you've been in this class for a while, you can see that the work that we've done and the handouts that we've given, that the work that we're doing is really working on really deep levels. Really deep levels. You've shared some stories with me through private emails and stuff that are just profound, and I'm very appreciative of hearing those stories because it gives me a little bit of validation and a little bit of enthusiasm to take this even further. The work you do, and I know, is tough, and a lot of the work is about finding the stories, your issues, your core fears, your core characters, dramas, challenges, and so on. Now, antithetical to this is actually denying it, walking away from it, running away from it. Our emancipation from the barriers, boundaries, restrictions, and such of our connection with all things, as we've demonstrated through different levels of this class, is us seeing the projector, the lens that's cracked or filtered with these issues that are covering the core in the heart. Because the core is the singularity, the core is the projector. So the projector projects out these dramas, issues, challenges, and characters that we have repeating in our life. So as we work through the filters, suddenly the dramas dissipate in our lives, the challenges, the antagonists, all of those start to change. And there's a reward for this, and we're getting to it. It gets into the diamond. However, duality, polarity become the critical issue. So, as we've been working with these things, and I've been lecturing on these issues, this Mobius has two different states, and we go through two different states. I'm taking this Mobius here, and let's say I draw the contractions from it, both in the masculine and feminine, which is the mental and emotional. So this, we could say, is associative separation. Associative separation is you start discovering that the core issues, the core fears, the core challenges have something to do with you. You and your issue are related, and also as you move through the issue, you start connecting with more things in and around you. So it's associative separation. Still separation, but associative separation. So in this understanding, we went over some of the Taoist principles. And those Taoist principles, very simply stated, that's why I love the Taoist principles, is the mind and the thoughts are not you, but they're yours. The emotions are not you, but they're yours. The physical sensations in the body are not you, but they are yours. And so when you go beyond the mind, go beyond the emotions, go beyond the sensations in the body, there you find the true self. So in that state then is where you're starting to step out from these boundaries, mentally and emotionally, and experience association with more of the reality around you. And also, one of the big things is you're experiencing familiarity with the difference between consciousness and mind. Mind is limited and elusive, illusionary, I should say. And consciousness is eternal and permanent. So consciousness, as we've seen before, is the screen of which the character, the body, and other bodies are operating on. That's you. So your body's not really you, just like the Taoist principle. The body is yours, but it's not you. The mind and thoughts are yours, but they are not you. The emotions are yours, not you. So associative helps with this process, but if we were to draw this from a little different perspective, this pole and this pole would be, in comparison, dissociative separation. I am not what you fear most. I have nothing to do. All these characteristics that let's say the mind tells you, I don't want any part of being needy. I don't want any part of being an enabler. I don't want any part of being abandoned. I have nothing to do with these things. I don't have fear. I don't have all these issues. So the more you resist it, the more separative it becomes. You move to the other pole. You move to the greatest separated poles. So that's dissociative separation. And spirit is always trying to work by giving us, this one seems to be going, by giving us periods of highs and periods of lows. Then back to periods of highs and lows. Always trying to give us experience in the two wide dualities so that we begin to embrace it, begin the process of depolarizing and bringing them into ourselves. Oops. Whoops. You get the idea. The sine wave is happening between the associative and dissociative, getting us to the point where the dissociative becomes palatable. Remember, they're ours, but they are not us. And as we looked at fear, pain, shame, blame, guilt, grief, anger, those are all flags. Those are all emotions that we have a relationship with where we want to run away from. We don't naturally feel like we should run towards pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, grief, and so on, anger. Well, those are good flags to help us to recognize that something is afoot and ready to begin to come back into integration. So the fear is one layer, one level. The fear, pain, shame, blame, guilt, grief, and anger. And remember, in the last session we had here at Storm Wisdom in July, I went over rage, outrage, and intolerance. Why do we need it? Well, if pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, grief, and so on are flags, and they take us into emotions that we normally want to run from, this whole class has been about learning and experiencing little by little that the stories that arise inside of pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, grief, anger, and so on are how we integrate and open one of these boundary markers. Because literally, when in previous sessions, I have used the theory of Purusha and Prakriti to show that consciousness is everything, and we are at the very core, the very center of the balance between Purusha and Prakriti. Our heart sits right on that very center. So as we take apart the boundaries, going through the pain barrier, fear, shame, blame, guilt, grief, and so on, we arrive at like the next layer, which is the rage, outrage, and intolerance. Rage, outrage, and intolerance kind of holds a curtain over powerlessness, worthlessness, helplessness, hopelessness. And these are our deepest core fears. And if we used the same methodology, the same attitude of embracing the pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, grief, like embracing a child, then we could hear its story. Because the child, that wounded aspect, holds all of the information necessary to bring to you. You are, and I mentioned this in the last evening session, our consciousness is like the king or the queen of our inner tribe. So we are the spokesperson, the nurturer. And when we sense one of these emotions, starting with pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, grief, and so on, listen to them, take their stories all the way back, and disentangle the stories, eventually you come up upon, or you may have cross connections at any point in there that take you into rage, outrage, and intolerance. It's going into the make rage and outrage or intolerance okay. Embrace it. Treat it like it's one of those wounded dualities in you, wounded child, that's ready to see a little more and integrate a little more. So, going through rage, outrage, and intolerance opens up powerlessness, worthlessness, hopelessness, helplessness. And all of those are critical for allowing you to break through these barriers. Last week, I talked a little bit about this and gave an example of how moving through powerlessness, let's just say powerlessness. When we take powerlessness and we go all the way back, past characters, because characters show you you're not at the core. If there's characters involved, you're dealing with an issue on the way towards the core issue. If you go back to being in the void, where consciousness separated, where you went unconscious, where you were powerless, as long as you fight powerlessness, you remain in polarized dynamics. So you remain pushing the karmic wheel, pushing and pushing, competing with the two dualities. I don't want to be powerless, so you rally up all of your energy, focus, and you go out to prove you are not powerless. Until the point where you've proved inside of powerlessness, when you make it truly okay, yes, I'm powerless. All of a sudden, that's like moving through the brainwave states from beta brainwave, very dissociated, into alpha, deeper into delta, theta, gamma, and you feel complete and whole. And you realize your consciousness. And you have nothing to do with the powerlessness because you're conscious. So you can still communicate. And you can communicate what's most important. Your equality, your boundary, your needs in that situation. So the antithesis of powerlessness is accepting the powerlessness, but from a point that you already are Purusha. You already are the entire Purusha and void and consciousness. So you already are whole. So what you discover when you take powerlessness is, on the other side of powerlessness, what happened? You discover the duality of abandonment. You abandoned yourself. You are looking for you as the one to validate your experience. This was huge for me when I went through this aspect, this challenge. And this is what began giving me the journey through the wound. As you grab the wound and you make it okay, you go through the eye of the needle. And as you go through the eye of the needle, you wind up experiencing the full quantum. So we get caught up inside of the, as I was speaking on the last Storm Wisdom session, last evening session, that the diagonals hold all the keys to all the geometries within creation. And the black diamond is connected to the white diamond. I drew the graphic. I keep forgetting that cord.
Please remember. We don't want you falling.
So, a diamond, as we were going over earlier, doesn't have to be the shape of the jeweler's diamond, the jeweler's version of the diamond. The diamond can be designed in any shape, any that the designer desires. But one of the simplest forms of the diamond is the star tetrahedron. And I showed how the star tetrahedron, if you were to draw a circle and divide it in half of it is black, half of it is white, half of the diamond pokes through the top side, which is like this would be representative of the dark side of the diamond, or the yin side, and the top part is inside of the white part, or yang, of the yin and yang. And the opposite is true. This upper part here represents Purusha, and Purusha is poking through the very bottom of the yin portion of the yin and yang, so it has a white aspect. So inside of the very core, we have the black diamond. And inside of the black diamond is all of our unconscious stories, our unconscious beliefs about ourselves. So to navigate through the black diamond, which is inside of the core of your own heart, to go in and out of the dark part of your own heart requires the ability to see through the incompleteness of the stories and how they create the belief systems, and then how the belief systems are used by the inner tyrant. And it's used on you to keep you on the hamster wheel, always trying to prove yourself, always trying to validate that you are a good person by doing X amount of work, because that's the best way that we know how to demonstrate our goodness, is by proving it, demonstrating it, but not seeing it. So we keep recreating the same challenges, the same problems, until we see through the issue. Experience going through the issue. And a lot of experiencing going through the issue, remember I said before, the only way around an issue is through it. So, when we take powerlessness and make it okay, see how you're powerless and make it okay. Come home. Because usually what happens when you take powerlessness, as soon as you feel like you're getting close to truly feeling powerless, it's intolerable. So it drives you to go out and prove that you're not powerless. Until you're ragged, and in the raggedness nobody recognizes you, so then you're pissed off about how much you did, and no one's giving you any kind of validation for what you did, because you did amazing things. Well, it's time for you to recognize you. It's time for you to make powerlessness okay. As we started working with all of this quantum navigation work, it's really about seeing we already are complete, but how are we distracted from it? And so our distractions lie in our core fears. We don't want to go anywhere near that. So it's counterintuitive. The pathway to integration is counterintuitive. When we're tired, and it's that way for a good reason, because it builds up experience until you're mature enough and tired enough to face powerlessness. So if you take powerlessness and the method, you successfully embrace powerlessness, you made it okay to just accept. Yeah, part of me feels powerless, and yeah, I see in a number of ways I am powerless. But I'm still conscious. I'm still conscious. That gives me a whole lot of capacity. I have communicative capacity to enact my equal rights, communicate my needs, my boundaries and such. Okay, so as you embrace that, you go through the eye of the needle, which means you can't be trapped by your darkness, your unconsciousness. You trap you until you're ready. So as I've worked with my issue on powerlessness, I now find I can move into the dark, the black diamond, and not get caught by any contraction. If you feel contraction, this is where all your stories come up. It's kind of like you got a toothpaste tube, right? And you start squeezing it, and all this stuff starts coming out. These are all the stories. Wow, 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 wow. All these whys, right?
Charlie Brown.
So when it's empty, there's no more story. You've worked through your story. You know your stories aren't real. Thus, the belief systems that they propagated about yourself are not real. So that then helps you as you experience contraction, and inside your heart you have contraction and expansion capabilities. So inside of the darkness, where it's seemingly labeled, storied as being cold, contracted, isolated, separated, abandoned, it's not. Because as you make this powerless okay, all your parts start coming back to you. So your quantum experience, your wound takes you right into the quantum and opens you up as you make it okay. As you sanction the unconscious part of you, the part that's growing through experience. Now you're making it okay as the king or queen, spokesperson of your inner tribe. One of the dualities is your powerlessness. Powerlessness has to be there so that powerfulness can arise. So if we don't accept our powerlessness, then our powerfulness is not rooted and grounded.
It's a reaction to powerlessness.
Yes, it's just a reaction. And so it's hollow. But if it's rooted, you accept then your powerlessness. Oh my God, it fulfills you infinitely because you bridged your duality. And you can only bridge your duality in consciousness, conscious experience. So through the heart, you embrace that powerlessness, then it starts to open you back up fully. So you're not caught by the layers and levels, the geometries of unconsciousness. You're not stuck. You're free. There's no story holding you back. So your belief system, your projector on your lens is now polished. Oh, I don't have a story. I mean, yes, I have an unconscious story, but it's not me. It's mine. It's not complete. I am all of it, the root and the branches of the entire tree. So if we move that then into worthlessness, this is a huge one. How many of us feel like I've got to exhibit X amount of intelligence in this skill or that subject or whatever before you can feel like, yeah, I'm intelligent. And how long does that last? It doesn't. It fleets away. So our worthlessness isn't about our intelligence, though. Access to our consciousness, not our mind, helps us then in integrating this part. So, worthlessness, for me, as an example, many things in my life were taken away from me. People I loved died or left, or lots of things, physical things, possessions, all kinds of things. I lost a lot. So, what's the story? Well, the immediate knee-jerk reaction is, I must be worthless. So you keep trying. You try harder. Work harder. And so you get something, and then, just like that, it's gone. What? I must be worthless. Everything's being taken away from me all the time. No, that's not it. Keep going. So as so many things got taken away, eventually, you find you're running away from worthlessness. I found I was running away from worthlessness. So anything I did wasn't good enough, wasn't intelligent enough, wasn't articulate enough, wasn't researched enough, whatever. Until you start realizing that's part of your root of unconsciousness. I can't accept myself. I don't accept my intelligence because I invalidate myself. I'm invalidating by not recognizing my own gift. Our gifts are the hardest to recognize in ourselves. Unless someone's told us 1,000 times, and Maybe lyrically we accept it, but do we really believe it? Your gift, then, is the same way. It's hiding under your resistance to accept worthlessness. Accept worthlessness, and you'll be amazed at seeing yourself in a different way and the powerfulness that you have. The talents and capabilities and gifts that you have that are being hided. That are being hid. No judgment.
You're not articulate enough.
I know. Jeez, okay, I'm accepting that. Sometimes I'm not. I accept that. And as I accept that, then all of a sudden it moves, you're embracing it. You're taking that wounded duality with you, polarized duality with you into the quantum, and suddenly you feel how powerful, how beautiful, how exceptional you really are. Because you already are everything. You're just distracted from it. Yes?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The eclipse.
Yes.
When you were talking about this, the black diamond, sorry. When you were talking about the black diamond, I had the thought that the universe gives us these opportunities to come smack face to face with the black diamond.
Yes.
And that would be like an eclipse, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So what is lurking in your darkness of your subconscious, your heart, the dark part of your heart? We all can't get rid of our shadow when we're walking outside, unless you walk in the shade. Well, it's kind of the same thing. You can't get rid of these shadow parts, which are incomplete parts of consciousness, immature parts of consciousness. But it's up to us to find that we are the one to validate these wounds by honoring them, noticing your part. Your part is to understand you are the king or the queen or spokesperson of your tribe of dualities, and it's up to you to nurture them into full reintegration, into paradox, because you're both. Only in the unconsciousness can new things be found, new things be formed, new things be researched, and new exciting ways of doing things. So part of us will always be unconscious, and it has to be treated with more compassion so that we can use it for what it's designed for. Moving into unconsciousness helps us find more conscious ways. So in the eclipse, and this was really beautiful because I noticed inside of the eclipse, I knew when the moon was moving over the sun, I could tell exactly where it is. And as that process was going on, my entire void came up. And I'm like, okay, well, any sharp objects inside of the void? Nah, nothing really to work on. And then this being came, this beautiful being. It was all black and black hair, but it had all this blue and gold in its hair and all these stars and things, and it bowed. And I took it as that it's a symbol of the work of working with these aspects of your consciousness and bringing them into holism. Instead of dualism, you're allowing them to integrate. So worthlessness, powerlessness, hopelessness. Hopelessness is huge. It's the bottom rung. Because hopelessness means you've been through powerlessness, worthlessness, and you've ratified them. Yes, I'm powerless. Yes, I'm worthless. And so you've given up hope. When you hit the hopelessness, it's like, I can't change myself. No, I can't. And it's like, it's a moment of like in between breaths. It's a moment of stopping, there's a word for it. I can't get it out.
I know what you're saying, but I can't find it either. Pause.
It's a pause. And in that pause, it's just before you start creating another circle. If we were to draw Purusha as consciousness, Prakriti as the void, this is the void, this is Purusha. This would be like, here's the pole, the southernmost pole, and then you create an octave deeper into separation, greater separation and desperation.
So it's kind of like the ultimate projection, because you're seeing it as an external thing, or you could get to some hopefulness.
Yeah, it's almost like you've given up. Hopelessness. Now, in hopelessness, it's almost like, you're stuck, you can't see any way out, but the way out is accept. Is accept.
That's the window to surrender, though, when you're hopeless.
Yes!
It's surrendering.
It is surrendering, and this is where you find...
Negative surrender.
This is where I accept. If you accept your hopelessness, oh my God, it brings you back through the eye of the needle, through the diamond in the heart, and brings you out into expansion. I wanted to... Yes, go ahead.
Just while you're doing that, this just popped in my mind. I had a session with a client last week, the Skype sessions that I did, and she was telling the story. She's in Brooklyn. She was telling the story about how there's this homeless lady that was a girl, pretty young, with a big sign that's, and she was sitting on the corner with it, and the sign said, helpless and hopeless, or something like that. And this client of mine, she's quite a unique person. She marches down there and she starts yelling. Well, no, I didn't think she was yelling, but you can't be hopeless. There's all this, and she's giving her a pep talk, whatever. She's, tomorrow I want you to change that sign, and she brings her cardboard and everything. And the next day, the sign said something like hungry but hopeful. It just reminded me of what you were saying. But she got it.
Yeah.
She got it.
Yeah. If we take that hopelessness then and surrender, what you can see in that moment of surrendering and accepting it is that the ultimate duality is the betrayal and abandonment. You betrayed you. You left. You didn't remain conscious and caring for yourself. So inside of all of those aspects or characteristics I just described, hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness, powerlessness, ultimately it reveals the duality we're most concerned with, the abandonment, betrayal. Yes?
I can put my mind into that, into like getting the words right. So in our culture, the idea of you betrayed yourself, or you didn't support yourself through a process. It seems like in our culture, the only information that most people get, you retract from if you're somewhat spiritual or clear-minded, because it seems so ego-based. You know, like you didn't support yourself. Seems like the only path is to have an inflated ego,
To be selfish.
to have supported yourself. And so I would love for that conversation to evolve for us about, like the creation of, that pathway that's the balance of the ego, because it's like pointing a direction.
It's exactly what you were talking about with powerlessness and powerfulness.
Yes. Yes.
Because they're just going to hit off of each other if one is a reaction to the other. So.
Right. If I have these belief systems about my self-worth, it doesn't matter then how much work I do in putting out my material or whatever, what lengths I go through to try to be successful in business or whatever way. It's going to reflect in that it's going to fall apart because the cracks in that belief system are being projected out from your quantum singularity into the reality, and then you got to live through the drama to teach you to empower yourself.
And to teach you what's being projected from
from the cracked lens, right. So my self-worth then, let's go back to the powerlessness and the worthlessness. All right, the worthlessness, let's say, no matter what I do, it never seems to be enough. If I did 1,000 drawings and I did it all perfectly, perhaps it's not accepted by the one place that I'm taking it to be sold. Okay, it falls apart. There's a drama. The manager kicks me out of there and throws all my drawings out with me. Those kinds of things crop up from the innate belief system running through and the inner stories. I'm not good enough. These are not good enough. They're gonna laugh at me. I'm not gonna articulate good enough in the meeting, and sure enough, then it happens.
Do you know the duality she's asking about? She's talking about the self-denial versus, like, when we try to compensate for that, how do you take care of yourself in the physical reality? Because we see that the opposite is having a big ego and being selfish and narcissistic. So how do you work that particular duality? That's what you're asking, right?
Well, and I just think that our culture is informing a lot of people to do that thing.
Yes, I see it.
There's not healthy models,
right,
for finding how to support yourself.
Well, reality is always trying to work a way through you, through your belief systems and stories. And so perhaps then, let's say you're taking that course as being, I gotta, because I feel inferior, I gotta project, superior, okay? And so that means really pumping up the ego and getting out there and being, but you will meet so many hardships along the way that kind of round out the sharp edges, and eventually over time you begin to look more closely inside. Hopefully you start looking more to the cracked lens inside you. Reality's trying to do its best every which way possible.
So how do you, because this is kind of my question too, in this particular issue, when you're working with the dualities, how do you support yourself from a non-egoic place? So you're not swinging back and forth from I'm worthless to look at me, I'm the king of the world.
Well, you start seeing, from this perspective, you start seeing your wholeness. And as you start seeing your wholeness, your success isn't dependent on you then. It's almost the free will illusion. So you start attracting to you those beings that help you ground into more of a non-dualistic state. You're taking stair steps towards non-dualism, non-polarity. So you're moving away from the massive ego projection to beingness. From the doer to the beer, you are moving more in alignment with divine, and divine starts happening. You start attracting the right people to you. It's being aware of that. You're being taken care of. We always have been, we always will be. It appears that you have to do all the work. And there is a balance that's taking place in changing the mental scape and from the doership and gently moving you over into the beership. But you gotta be okay with what arises, because it's training. Some days it's feast and some days it's famine, but if you trust, you'll get through. You always have what you need. You may not always like how much you have.
I had this interesting thing happen in my meditation during the eclipse where I can't even remember, there was so much going on. I can't remember what thought it was. But I had this thought, and then I snapped into this quantum perspective of seeing this deep love for the being that thought. Because that thought was so pure and so beautiful.
Oh, that's awesome.
That it was like, wow, I love that beingness that would think that thought. And then all this like love for self just opened up, and I got this feeling like that's what self-love is. It's the, loving that connection that you have, because you wouldn't be thinking those pure, beautiful thoughts if you weren't connected to quantum. So it was like this interchange that just expanded in my awareness and made me really appreciate loving my beingness.
Whoa.
It was really cool.
Awesome.
Beautiful. The process we're going through is, you get to experience it at times when we do the meditation, and at times when you're at home and you're doing the meditation. But you as you move into the quantum, it's almost like that consciousness is spherical. It's all around you, and it's so vast and deep, rather than being inside of the doer and in the mind, which is all linear. And this relationship that takes place, this rooting that begins, re-identifies. Remember what we said in the workshop. You can't change a person until that person is willing to see themselves differently. And what you described is that. Mm-hmm. That's what we are. From that holistic view, experiencing that separated view of ourselves. So it's a dance, and it takes a bit to change from the mental scape to the quantum scape.
Mm-hmm. The thought keeps coming to me too that, I don't know, what do you think? Underlying these qualities of powerlessness, helplessness, seems to me underneath all of that is the point, I am unlovable.
Yes, that's part of the hopelessness and such.
Which comes from the original core abandonment issue.
Yes, from the abandonment and betrayal. All of those aspects, all of those darker aspects, they're yours, but they are not you. As you accept them and embrace them, there's a part of me that feels like dirt, like I'll never amount to anything. Because of that quantum that you were talking about, that perspective of seeing yourself from the whole, that's the part we've been working with, familiarizing ourselves, because that aspect has the love and the compassion to now, because we are the king, the queen, the spokesperson of our inner tribe, we are the one then that can take the inner child, the male and female part of ourselves, the higher self and lower self. So the darkest part of ourself, that we have the compassion then in seeing how all the dark roots create that entire oak tree and all the branches into consciousness. That part, as you accept the dark and your history and all the dark things that you've ever done or ever thought about yourself, the compassionate understanding and appreciation for that part, which made it possible for you to be as refined as you are and have that love and compassion. That part comes back and embraces and pulls all of those dualities back into itself. Yin finds home in yang, yang finds home in yin when they have compassionate appreciation for each other. So the bottom loves the top and the top loves the bottom in that compassionate appreciation. And with all of those stories then, and when I say stories, I'm talking about we talked about the pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, grief, and all of that, opening up to rage, outrage, and intolerance, and then the hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness. All of those stories are so vital to see them clearly and not run away from, so that we can move into the absolute darkest part of our unconsciousness, not make a story or a belief about ourselves, and then we can reassert ourselves in that absolute compassion, love, and clarity. And that's what gives us the ability to move into the black diamond and also integrate inside of the white diamond. So I was so taken by that experience. I know I got to hurry up here, but
You still have to meditate.
yes, I'm saving space for the meditation. Okay, so all the work we've been doing over this time, obviously it's very deep. It's hugely deep. And how many lifetimes that we've gone round and round and round and round and round fighting these very elements of our own stories, of our own belief systems, of our own inner tyrant that's the one putting the pressure on us. How many lifetimes has it taken? And now we're ready. We're able to take the pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, grief, and such, use them like nurturing our own children that we care for, and let them tell the story that then you as the adult can add to a lot more rounded understanding and consciousness, so you mature your children, your inner dualities. So those elements lead to uncovering the rage, outrage, and intolerance, and then they unveil the hopelessness, worthlessness, powerlessness, and such, so that you can move through any of these boundaries inside of yourself. That takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of meditation. It takes a lot of standing up when everything inside of you is shaking and telling you to leave. But if you've done the work, then there's a benefit. And that benefit is that there's no longer duality. As you're doing this work, you're allowing your dualities to come together and integrate. Now, access to the diamond in the heart is directly dependent on you working on these inner boundaries, these inner core fears and challenges. As you go through them, the experience is phenomenal, powerful, beautiful. And there's so many experiences I would love to share with you, but of late, they've been having me experience moving into absolute fluid, diamond, dynamic, faceted consciousness. It is, it's beyond what I could talk about. And as I've been experiencing this, I had this friend who, from England, who was going to a special workshop in Europe, and posted the other day an advert for that workshop. Pardon me. And this advert stunned me. One of my passions in my past was sacred geometry, hence the geometric ball there. And the workshop that this friend of mine was going to, her name is Alexis, they had a 17th century artist who's a geometer, a mystic geometer. And when I saw the graphic, I went, oh my God, that's exactly what we've been talking about and sharing inside of the workshop, or inside of these evening sessions. And it's by Jacob Boehm. And I was talking about how, as we work through our dualities inside of our unconsciousness, that's like this aspect here, the void, and our immature consciousness. And as we work through the issues, you can barely see it here, but there's part of a triangle, and up here is the star tetrahedron. Well, here would be like the eye of the needle that I spoke about. I couldn't believe this drawing. This is everything that we've been talking about over the last 2 years, and here everything is drawn inside of this. These ancients were pretty smart, pretty experienced. Anyway, as you work through those issues, you're easily able then to move through the eye of the needle. And if there was a geometric drawing that, in the most simplest form, would convey that diamond, faceted, dynamic, liquid essence of consciousness, it would be here. You see those facets and you see all of these diamonds. This would be a good symbol of it here. And then this would be more like Purusha.
That's the Vesica Pisces you're talking about.
Yes, up here. But notice there's a Vesica down here and a Vesica here. It's all a matter of passage, and so this part of the diamond separated, but yet they come together here at the center point. So the eye of the needle is also the passage from the dark diamond, the black diamond, into the white diamond.
And that
So
eye of the needle looks like an iris.
Yeah.
yes, yes. I've seen some statues in Hindu too, where they show that eye of the needle. And so you can't go through the eye of the needle until your dualities come together. You've made peace with the duality. You're no longer pushing them away, resisting them, denying them, as we spoke about earlier in here. And earlier, I was talking about how diamond can be any shape, and we've seen with the Schrodinger's cat Quantum systems such as an atom or a proton, photon, should be a photon, not a proton, can exist as a combination of multiple states corresponding to different outcomes. Combination of multiple states in physics. Your states are solid, liquid, gaseous, plasma, and I would postulate to say, if we added etheric, void, and consciousness, you would have 7. So quantum systems exist as multiple states with different outcomes. So in the quantum, you're solid, liquid, gaseous, plasma, void, and conscious. So in the diamond state, it could be solid, liquid, gaseous, plasma, but it's a state of consciousness that's non-dualistic. You've worked through the belief systems, the stories, your own inner tyrant, and now the diamond can be how you see yourself and love yourself in all that darkness. Your darkness is immature. Who cares for it? You do. It's up to you to mature it. So you are the king or queen, spokesperson of your inner tribe of childlike scouts. Your scouts are pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, grief, worthlessness, powerlessness, anger, and such. Take them as your tribe. Use them as the scouts they are to communicate to you and empower yourself from that consciousness of non-duality, where you see the vitalness in their incomplete and immature states of consciousness, states of feeling, states of beliefs and stories, and nurture them. Because it is you that's evolving you. Your unconsciousness is what you're responsible for. And it is what brings you into diamond consciousness, ending your polarity and duality. So that's it for the session tonight.